Hey everybody, welcome to 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. I am your host, Brian Slagel. I am the CEO of Metal Blade Records, home to bands like Metallica, Slayer, Killswitch Engage, Amon Amarth, Cannibal Corpse, Squar, Fates Warning, and also King's X was part of our family for quite a long time. And that's who we're going to talk about today. One of the most underrated bands of all time. We all know this. They should have been huge. We all know this. We'll talk about all of that today with the great Hal Sparks. He is a massive, massive King's X fan, and he knows his stuff on King's X. It's going to be pretty fun to talk to him about it. As always, we get to talk to Mark Lewis. This is, again, our Nashville set of recordings, so it's a little bit different. You'll hear some background noise. It won't be perfect. There's no video for this, so we won't have any video anywhere. And the episodes are a little bit shorter, but still a lot of fun and a lot of good stuff. So you guys have to check out our friends at Old Glory. Old Glory offers over 300,000 items for music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture fans, featuring officially licensed merch from iconic brands and top sports teams. Discover the perfect fan gear, and you can save with our exclusive discount. When you go to oldglory.com and buy your stuff, enter the code METAL1982. Again, that's Metal 1982. You're going to get 15% off of your order. So go to oldglory.com, check out their stuff, and buy some things. Thank you. By saying all of that, let's go up to Canada and talk to Martin Popoff.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, nice choice. Dogman, King's X. So yeah, this is, we're up into the 5th album for King's X. I love this album. It is my favorite King's X album. I think is most people's favorite King's X album. It's not particularly different than most of their previous albums. I mean, Doug Pinnick really thought that Brendan O'Brien helped them capture the heft and the heaviness of their live situation. I don't know. Every time rock stars bring up live, it doesn't make sense to me, but it definitely captures a heft and heaviness. I think it's super, super high fidelity and has nothing to do with anybody's live sound. But yeah, this album has a lot of like big, galumphing, slow, doomy stuff. It was the album that was supposed to break them, and this is absolutely the a song with the most songwriting talent poured into it sort of thing. You get that great sort of jazz chord to open the thing up, and immediately the singing of these quirky lyrics, you know, give me $1, give me 50 cents.
Give me $1 or give me 50 cents. Let me take it back if that ain't what I meant. Give me a coat or give me a bite. Give me a light bulb and make sure it's bright.
You know, this album has a lot more psychological analysis thing to it. Doug has this funny way of writing these lyrics that it's a little bit of that Ian Gillan English as a second language kind of thing that he does, where there's a lot of awkward phrasing that doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's almost frustrating and even like it almost puts you in a bad mood, the way he strings together certain words. But this is a song like that. It's very Sabbathy, but it's also kind of rappy. It's kind of a little Walk This Way in terms of the way the vocal progresses through the song. And it's got that great sort of crescendo moment as we're moving through, you know, the chorus parts and then the great grooving thing at the end where just you get this wall of heft coming out of this album. But yeah, you know, remember this album was also released in 3 variations of color, right? Actually 4, I guess. Red, yellow, green, and blue. Album artwork by Leon Alvarado. And yeah, this was supposed to break them. It was a big time. We're late in the grunge era, and it's almost like King's X was about to get their grunge comeuppance in terms of like finally having the success that they so richly deserve. This is the band that everybody considers one of the great underrated bands of all time that should have been huge. All the grunge people loved them. So this was their big coming out party, the big the high profile producer and Brendan O'Brien, and it didn't quite happen for them despite being on Woodstock 94, and they played with Pearl Jam, Motley Crue, Scorpions, Type O Negative, and it just didn't make it for them. And they made a video for this song as well, first video they ever did. But an absolutely, you know, charming, accessible enough song, even though it's really, really heavy and kind of slow. Maybe it's not particularly accessible. I think the lyrics are pretty obscure as well to this song. But yeah, it's just beautifully performed, produced, sung. The lyrics are, the vocals are incredible in it as well. And I adore the song. It's probably my favorite King's X song of all time. So yeah, nice choice, Brian. King's X, Dogman.
Thanks, Martin. I wouldn't ever call myself angry when I'm listening to King's X, though. I'm always really happy when I'm listening to King's X. Always interesting insights from Mr. Martin Popoff, who knows his stuff. Like I've said before, he's written over 150 books about hard rock and heavy metal. I don't know how you can do that. And he's writing more and more and more. Is he the most prolific writer in our world? I would have to say probably yes. Find me another one. I don't think there is. It's always fun to have him on and talk about all these different songs.
This episode is brought to you by Credit Karma. When it comes to your money, Credit Karma keeps you ahead of the game. You can count on Credit Karma to keep up with your financial needs as they evolve, helping you monitor your progress and giving you personalized recommendations so you can make strides towards your goals. Make sure you're on the right track, no matter where you are on your financial journey. Intuit Credit Karma. Karma you can count on. Download today.
Once again, yet again, we come to you from the beautiful studio just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, of again, the great, wonderful, amazing producer, Mr. Mark Lewis.
You are the legend.
How are you, sir?
I'm good. We've been in here for days talking about music. None of us have eaten or used the bathroom.
Hunger strike.
But yeah.
So King's X, Dogman. I mean, King's X, to me, and I think everybody else, is one of the most criminally underrated bands of all time. Should have been huge. Still cannot figure out why they weren't huge. Well, you can maybe, but it's still a crime that they weren't huge. And the early records were phenomenal, but I really wanted to talk about this record and this song in particular because, first of all, it's their biggest song. If you go on Spotify or anything, this song comes up as their biggest song. Definitely their heaviest record, I think, of all. The last record they did with Atlantic before they went to Metal Blade. And this was one of the ones that kind of had all the ingredients of being a big record. The sound was great. Brendan O'Brien produced it, who's obviously amazing. It sounds great. The songs are all really good. And still, they couldn't become huge. I think it's their biggest record, but I don't know that it ever got to even being a gold record, I don't think.
Yeah, dude, it's an amazing sounding record. I mean, it was something that I discovered because I'm trying to remember if I heard him first on a Metal Blade comp, but I went sideways into him because I had a guitar teacher that noticed I was starting to develop an ear for a little bit more progressive stuff. And he actually lives here now. He's an awesome guy. He really put my mind to sonics, and when he noticed I was getting into progressive stuff, he's like, don't forget about the songs. And he's like, you should listen to King's X. And Dogman was already out at that time. Now hearing the record, I mean, as an adult, I'm like, God damn, this sounds incredible. They cut it in Atlanta at Southern Tracks, I know that. And Brendan O'Brien had a pretty consistent engineer. I forget the guy's name, Nick Didia.
Oh, Nick Didia. Yeah. Great guy, by the way.
Yeah. I've never met him, but I mean, hell of amazing team with Nick and Brendan. And I think Brendan's incredible. I would watch his interview with Rick Beato. Brilliant interview. Rick's really good at asking questions, asked Brendan a lot of really good questions. And it wasn't just the typical, like, what did you think about these lyrics? Or what, just ridiculous producer questions that don't really tell you much. He really got into the nitty gritty with Brendan. The record, it sounds so good, and the vocal production in particular I love on that album. It's so perfectly done. I wouldn't say understated, but like King's X has always had brilliant vocal harmonies, and they would do really weird stuff too.
I was reading something about them the other day because I was kind of researching for this, and I mean, there's a lot of theories why they didn't become big. I mean, number one, they had manager issues in the early days, which didn't help them at all, but also they were so different. While they're super melodic and a lot of Beatles influences, this sort of stuff, they're all heavy, but they're kind of progressive. They were so unique and different. They didn't fit into any box, and now people need to fit into a box to be able to do something. And I think they're just so out there for a lot of people that they just couldn't grasp what they were doing because it was on such an insanely high level.
It was. And I mean, obviously, I think Doug pushed things socially, which was a lot for people at that point in time, too. Just being who he was a lot for people to swallow, I think. But the music, man, I mean, it is really progressive, and they're a tricky band in that way. They're almost like a Kansas or something like that, where you're like, wow, this is amazing music, and you don't realize how advanced and crazy it is. Like the vocal production I was talking about, like Ty does all the backup vocals, right? He's the one.
Jerry
harmonizing?
Anti. They all three of them sing.
Oh, so all three of them sing. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That makes even more sense now because there's so much going on, and it's funny because it was never like Queen big, but they're doing Queen things with the vocals.
100%. Very. I mean, I think if you would rate the two things they sound the most like, would be Beatles and Queen.
Yeah.
Vocally.
Yeah. Absolutely. The guitar sounds are great on that. It's a pretty bright and forward record, I think, for Brendan. Brendan's always had a nice kind of warmth to his albums in terms of the high end. Like you even listen to the Evil Empire by Rage or some of the other stuff like the Chili Pepper stuff that he did. I think they're a bit more warm, whereas this record definitely has a bit more of the metal in the high mids in the 4 to 6K area. It's just so perfectly mixed and well recorded. Great drum sound, great drum room, and just... I miss it, man. I come on your podcast and I just reminisce about the old days, but I feel like things like that will come back, obviously more with a bit more of the power these days, but things have been so incredibly mid-focused for so long, and you have these guys that are just masters of their craft that are making these metal records that are almost too pleasant to listen to, whereas you put on Dogman and you're kind of taken back by the guitar sound, by the dynamics of it. I had you in here listening to a record today, and we're thinking about records like that. We're thinking about records in the 90s that hit us hard, even if it was Cannibal Corpse. I mean, you listen to Gallery of Suicide versus some of the later stuff. There's something in those 90s records, I don't know whether it was a tape influence or something, but something about the mid-range is so different back then. And Dogman is the song and the record in particular is a really perfect example of how masterful those guys were and how different things sounded back then.
They're an interesting band when you listen to them because it's obviously Ty's an amazing guitar player. It's very guitar driven, but it's also very bass driven because Doug is also a phenomenal bass player. And to kind of get that right on a heavier level, like the stuff that Sam Taylor did, the first few albums are phenomenal, classic, all-time classic records. If you guys are not familiar with King's X or you're familiar with a couple songs, please go back and listen to that early stuff. I mean, give the Metal Blade stuff a listen too because it's great. Also, that early stuff is just so groundbreaking, so good. But while it was heavy and the production was really cool, it almost had kind of like a 60s vibe. And this one is definitely very much, this is dark and really heavy. It's a driving record. And Brendan's so good at doing that. Quick, fun fact about him. His very first produced record on Metal Blade Records, a band called Johnny Law, in the early 90s when we were at Warner Brothers. First record he ever produced, Brendan O'Brien.
How cool. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that then.
Yeah, it's actually a really good record. It was very Black Crowes-ish.
Okay.
Way before the Black Crowes, so it didn't do anything sad.
Yeah, you should put on the Brendan interview. I'm sure he talks about that. I mean, it was a lot to take in because it was so long. But, he talks all about how he got into producing and who he started, how he was engineering and all the things like that. And it's a cool story. I mean, and he did so much cool stuff,
He's a great guy. He's our lawyer, does all of his legal work and stuff too. Also, to give him credit, he produced the last AC/DC record, which is the best AC/DC record in probably 30 years. Power Up's such a great record, and Brendan produced it. And I mean, again, the brilliance of what he does, he got these performances out of these guys that were just, it's amazing. The songs are great, the performances are great, and these guys aren't really young. And he said they had a great time recording, it was super fun, and unfortunately it kind of sat for a while because of COVID. Eventually it came out, and that's up there with some of those early AC/DC records. I think a lot of that is because Brendan's just so good at what he does.
That's awesome. That is really awesome to hear. It's inspiring, actually, especially when guys that both of them have been doing it that long, and then they just, knock another one out of the park. It's like, oh man, it's inspiring for me to just be like, yeah, man, and just want to keep doing it, at this level,
Yeah, keep hoping. I was thinking about this song a lot because I do really love it, and I really wanted to talk about this song in particular. And we're going to talk later with the great comedian Hal Sparks, who's a massive King's X fan. It'd be interesting to get his takes, but I really want to talk about this song in particular. But I did have to do my due diligence and go back and what's the biggest King's X song on Spotify. Sure enough, it's Dogman. And now that we've talked about this before, but the 90s are kind of creeping back in, this everything, fashion, music, the whole thing. Like a lot of these 90s bands are having these big comebacks or getting bigger. I keep wondering, wouldn't it be great if somehow this song got somehow sucked into that radio world of 90s classic rock stuff. I don't know if it ever happened or how it would happen, but it's like maybe they're still up because they're still out there performing at a really high level, but it just drives me crazy. An album this good and a song this good that's so well crafted, well written, and well produced. I mean, it's popular, but not nearly where it should be.
I totally agree. And I mean, I would love for things to get back to the way they used to be. It's, I see it tipping a little bit. I see a lot of musicians, especially drummers, getting tired of the way things sound now. It would be great if everybody put their phone down a little bit and, put the computer or turn the screen off or something and just listen a little bit more. Because I think that's a lot of what made that so special is there wasn't the distractions and you weren't making records with your eyes back then, and I do see a lot of kids, and, I'm making a conscious effort. Not everybody, but many people trying to put their phone down, trying to reconnect with music. And also, the tides change. Things have been really, really overproduced, especially in metal, for a long time now. It kind of became so easy to make great or very good sounding records, even when the album or the players aren't very great. I think that people are looking back fondly at this stuff, and hopefully, it'll bring in some sort of escape for the people like us that do want to hear that thing,
Interesting thing about King's X too was, I think it was VH1 did the top 100 hard rock bands of all time. And this is when King's X was on Metal Blade, so it would have been, sometime in the early mid 2000s, I think, somewhere around there. So he did this special, and King's X ended up being number 83 on there, which when we got the list, it was the only Metal Blade band on there. I was like, oh, that's really cool that King's X made it. And I was happy that they made this list because it's compiled by like a lot of bands and influencers and stuff. So they got in there at number 83, well deserved. But the one thing that blew me away about that, so they had, everybody had like a 5-minute segment and something, and some other famous musician came in and talked about that band and then being influenced. And the guy who talked about King's X was none other than Richie Blackmore, which blew me away because I'm a massive fan of his, but he's kind of reclusive, doesn't do a lot of press, doesn't do a lot of stuff. But he went on and talked about how much he loved King's X and how interesting they were and all this stuff. I didn't know who was doing the part, so I just saw it when it came on VH1. I was like, holy cow, this is insane.
I can't even think of ever seeing a Richie Blackmore interview, much less him praising another band,
Yeah, the other bummer for them too was that, when all that grunge stuff started happening, like every one of those bands was hugely influenced by King's X. Chris Cornell would go, I remember I was at a couple shows where he would go to the show, he'd be front row in front of Doug Pinnick and be bowing at him. And, Doug's like freaking out. I was like, how am I supposed to perform when Chris Cornell is like bowing in front of me at the front of the stage? It was so crazy. But none of them, I guess, could really ever talk about that, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, that's so interesting, man. And I couldn't be less surprised though, because there's always a band's band, the bands that the bands love, and they're definitely,
these guys are one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man, absolutely. It is baffling. I kind of feel the same way about Seven Dust. Their first 3 or 4 records were so brilliant, and yeah, they do good, they do great. But I always thought that they would be a massive band.
People talk to me about this all the time. To be massive, you have to have a lot of ingredients, and a lot of things go your way. Most importantly, I make the analogy of a car. If you have a car with 4 working tires, that car is going to go really fast. If one of those tires isn't working, you're not going to go anywhere. And for a band, that means you have to have a great label, a great manager, a great lawyer, and a great booking agent. You need all of those things in order to really be at a high level. And like a band like Metallica has all of that in spades, like some of the greatest people in the business working around them. And King's X has never really had that. They never really had all of those resources at the same time. They got close, but there's always something missing. And that's a big part of why they never really got big, sadly.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, man. I mean, it's interesting having worked with as many bands as I have now to see the different lives and lifestyles that each band and band member will live. I may have one band that is doing good. They might make, say a school teacher's salary, a little bit more, and they make that on the road, and they make enough money to buy a house if they live, somewhere in middle America, and they do good and they're comfortable. And then you have another band of guys who might be selling twice the amount of records as them, but they are mismanaged and they don't have any money in their pockets, and we could do a
5-hour podcast on that.
Oh my God, could we ever, man? But I think there's been more than a couple bands on your label in particular where they aren't the biggest band in the world, but they're well managed. They own houses. They save money. and then I work with other bands that are on bigger labels, and they're just a disaster, and it's everything is just falling apart at all times. But then, they have their thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one thing I'm probably most proud of is from doing this label is we have a lot of bands who are able to do this for a living. They own houses and cars. They have a nice life, and they're able to do music for a living. And that's always been, whether they're the biggest band in the world or not, if you can just be sustainable and do that for a long period of time, which a lot of bands do. I mean, that to me is like the best thing about what I do is seeing these guys be able to do that. It's hard to do. And, back to King's X a bit. I mean, they're able to they're still out there touring, still out there making new music, putting out really good records. So there's still another band that's been able to do this for a long period of time and still remain successful enough that they can go out and do these sort of things. So while we always wish they were bigger, we talk about, bands like Umbridge Saint or Fate's Warning where they never had a gold record, but they're still performing and making music at a high level. And that's kind of the way things are with King's X too, I think.
And it's the original lineup.
Original 3, which that's rare too. You don't
Has it
see
been
that.
40 years for them probably, or close to it?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. I'm not sure. It's got to be pretty close. And they're such all great guys, and so happy they're still doing it. I missed this last tour by like a day. I think they're playing in Dallas the day. It's either the day before I got there or the day after I left.
I went with Rob Barrett here in Nashville. It sounded great. We had to bounce to a couple of shows that night, but we stayed there for a while, and it was really great.
Oh, no, that's right. They played in Vegas, and it was there, but it was the end of our year-end meetings. I was just exhausted.
Yeah.
And the venue they played at, I was smoking, and I hate smoking, so
don't blame me.
I opted, not to go. But a whole bunch of our staff went and said it was great, so good dudes. So as a producer, when you listen to a record like this Dogman record that Brendan O'Brien produced, do you listen to it as a fan, or do you listen to it like kind of critically as a producer engineer?
Oh, it's hard for me to listen to anything as a fan anymore. I mean, I heard it before I was as critical as I am now. Yeah, I can enjoy it. I can enjoy it quite a bit. It's so much easier for me to enjoy those things. And I mean, I think every producer would have a different answer to this, obviously. But I'm not distracted by the fakeness, you know what I mean? Because there's not fakeness on this album. It's so believable. There's no what's the word? Suspension of disbelief. It's, to me, it's like these records, a lot of them that we've talked about, especially on this podcast. It's like watching a good movie. Like it's like watching a Goodfellas or any great Scorsese movie or Godfather or Apocalypse Now. Like Jesus, man, like every freaking actor is part of that story. And then there'll be other movies, where you're like, God damn it, that guy just took me totally out of this, and I know that I'm watching a movie now. And the same thing will happen to me nowadays with a bad snare drum or something like that. Like I'll hear the snare drum sound like a robot, and I'm like, I can't do it.
Oh, Jay Rustin is the worst with that. Like he gets overly critical of a lot of records that I actually love, and he's like, I can't listen to that record, and he'll actually do his own mixes for these things so he can listen to them. He gets over the top. We've talked about that before on the podcast.
Him and I text each other. I mean, we could put you on a group text. You'd probably smash your phone with him and I. How much shit we talk. And dude, yeah. I mean, I listen to it as a fan. Yes, they're so well produced that it allows me to be a fan. Things like that. And it's, Brendan or Martin Birch or Andy or Colin or Daniel Bergstrand or Bob Clearmountain or Chris Lord-Alge. Like those are the guys that I know when they've done a record and I can go, yeah, this is going to be something I can listen to, and Jay especially too. I mean, I knew who Jay was before we became so friendly. And it's just a big thing for me. Obviously a lot of music's been ruined, doing what I do for a living. But when you can connect with a record like that, it's special, especially when a new one happens to come out, which is very rare these days.
Yeah.
So.
And the thing, too, about getting back to Brendan for a second, we've talked about this a lot with varying producers where they don't make every band that they do sound the same. Yeah. Like this Dogman record sounds way different than a Black Crowes record would sound, or even the new AC/DC record or anything that Brendan's done. I think that's a magical thing that very few producers, you mentioned Jay, I think Jay's really good at this, where you can hear him do Armored Saint record and a Coheed and Cambria record, but you wouldn't know that it's the same guy mixing those two records. And Brendan's the same way. Like, to me, this record sounds way different for King's X and probably stands out from their catalog a bit production-wise. And even for Brendan, when I heard it, it wasn't what I was expecting.
Yeah, the guitar sounds very heavy metal for Brendan. And I obviously, he just probably heard what Ty was doing and said, I have to capture this. And that's what you do. It's like this Entheos record I'm doing with Naveen. Like, I have a collection of amazing vintage drums, Yamahas and Gretchen, a bunch of snare drums and things that I've collected. And, we didn't use a single piece of it because Naveen has his kit and he knows how he wants to sound, and he has his guitar, and the snare drum is cranked to all shit, like it's a piccolo snare and things that, something that people, especially in bigger bands, really aren't playing these days. But Naveen came in, it's like, oh, this is what you do. We listen to a couple drums, whatever. But we always go back to where his ear goes, and you just have to capture that. And it's amazing to me when I hear about producers, some guys who are far more, successful than me, at least in terms of maybe singles and things like that. I hear about them replacing rhythm sections or not allowing drummers to play on a record, and guys that I know can play, and they have to meet this kind of status quo of their sound. And I'm like, man, would I love to have their money? Sure, but my mind doesn't work like that. Like, I'll lay awake at night and I'm like, should I have tried that thing? Should I have done this?
No, you gotta. I totally get it, and I understand. I see the same thing from my end of things, and I think you have to be organic and true to what you do. And other people, even like other labels, make more money and do stuff, but I wouldn't do things the way they would do things.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in production and everything else. And we have a society now where movies are all cookie cutter, music is all cookie cutter, like the artistic elements are out of it, which I'm happy to say I don't think is as much in metal as it is in some other genres like pop or something. You have to be able to sleep at night, right?
You do, and it's really fascinating. I mean, to watch guys, like I'm sure other label guys, that may have had more success than you, or guys that have parallel success to you, and you just watch how differently their brain works. Maybe somebody that's a good friend of yours that also owns a label. I have producer friends, or I have guys that do work for me who I think are brilliant engineers. And, I need something done, and I know that they can do it a certain way. And it's so interesting to watch somebody who's a bit more left-brained or right-brained. I can't remember which one it is. But I'm certainly kind of a rock and roll guy here. Like I let things go that maybe some guys could never. They're like, oh, it's got to be blocked on the grid. I'm like, why? Why do you got to do that? Why can't it just be fucking rock and roll? And I remember being a guitar player, I went to music school, and, my dad encouraged me to learn music and things like that. And then kind of having to unlearn some of the things that I had learned because I was getting too rigid. And it's just fascinating to watch other people work, and I think guys like Brendan obviously have this massive success rate and at being a chameleon and getting out of the way. And it's such a fascinating thing to listen to somebody like Brendan talk because, I can identify with him more than I can identify with a guy who's just kind of wiping the slate and focusing only on the vocalist or whatever it is. And look, you can't argue with guys that will wipe the slate and focus on the vocalist and sell 10 million records. I can't argue with that. But I can't work that way. And I don't identify with stuff like that.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I think it has to be organic. It has to. We come from that world where things are real, and all the records we put out, the actual band members play on them. There's no studio guys coming in. And that's always the way I felt that music should be. And, sadly, there are a lot of people that do it differently. But to each their own. And I do know that all three of the guys from King's X played the entire record.
Yeah.
And Brendan did a great job producing it. And thank you again for doing this. We always appreciate you.
Man, it's awesome being on here. Thank you.
Here we are back in Nashville, Tennessee, the Rock N Pod Expo. We're now going to talk to a man of many talents, stand-up comedian, actor, podcaster, and probably 500 other different things. Hal Sparks, how are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for asking. And I think it's better to just hyphenate the rest of it and just say 500 other things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, the common term is polymath, and we'll just leave it there.
So when I knew I was going to interview you, I thought we have to talk about King's X.
Yes.
Because you're a massive King's X fan.
Yes, I am a King's X essentialist. I believe that everyone needs as many King's X albums as they can stand in their collection.
Yes.
I will gladly, I almost feel like a King's X psychic when I come up to somebody and I go, what do you like? What kind of music do you like? And they'll go, I'm into I don't know, Alice in Chains, 90s, everyone. Okay, we'll start you with Dogman, and then we'll work our way back.
Yes.
Or I'm like, I like Pink Floyd. I'm like, okay, we'll start you with Gretchen, and then we'll go back one, and then we'll go forward into Faith, Hope, Love, and then on to that.
We need another 500,000 of you to make this all happen.
Yeah.
that's the thing. Like, we talked about it with Billy Sheehan. Billy brought it up on his own about a band that should have been huge is King's X. And we all say in the music business, I literally have had this discussion in the past 2 weeks with so many different people about that. And I just love the fervor of your fandom for it, because, that's, people are passionate about this band, and I think we all want them to be so much bigger than they are.
Well, okay, on the one hand, I agree. On the other hand, it depends on your definition of huge. And I don't mean to take this lightly or to dismiss the idea of mass appeal as not being a good thing, but their impact is. It's the kind of stuff that lasts. There are a bunch of bands that get very big, own the world, and for decades might even come and go. I would argue bands like U2 and others that are enormous and obviously impactful musically, but will hit a glass ceiling of merit and worth where people will look back and go, oh, I've heard it, or I don't need to hear anymore, or I get it, and that's that. And they wouldn't be wrong, necessarily. Not to downplay what they've done, but that's the nature of the art that they make. Whereas King's X, there's a period in everybody's life, if you like guitar music, or you like, soul music, or you like anything, that you can hear them and find resonance really in your life with a song. And that spreads into the rest of their work.
And I also make the argument a lot of times, too, because people ask me, like, all these bands that never had a gold record, but they still exist. Like, we have, for us, we have, like, Fate's Warning and Armored Saint, two bands, and Lizzie Borden, bands that never had a big hit, never had a gold record, but they're still doing it. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And King's X is the same way. They're still doing it at a high level. They're still putting out great music, still touring, still sounding amazing. So it's like, they never had that big record, but they're still doing it. And again, marathon, not a sprint. And I think your point is exactly right. Their impact on so many other bands and musicians, that legacy is never going to be taken away from them. And just like Thin Lizzy or other bands where you talk to any heavy metal band, whether it's Cannibal Corpse or Queensryche, they all love King's X, and they all can cite King's X as an influence.
Oh my God. I mean, like, I'm sure you've had this experience where somebody puts out a song and you're like, oh, they're trying to do a King's X song now.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I would argue that, like, I'm in Nerd Halen. We're the only Van Halen cover band, that does all three singers. So we do Without You from Gary's album. I would argue that's Eddie trying to do a King's X song. Listen to the riff, listen to the harmonies they put in, the kind of watery background vocals. He's like, I want to give that a shot. And
well, he was a huge King's X fan.
Yes, and everybody wants that. And the one of the amazing things about, like, artists that like them is not only that they love them as a band, there's this, like, I could never do that. Even the most talented artists you can think of, they listen to what these guys have done and go, God damn, how is that possible? It's a little spooky for some bands.
One of my favorite Doug stories was they were playing the Palace in L.A., so 1,200, 1,300 seat venue, sold out. Who's in the front row in front of Doug Pinnick bowing at him? Chris Cornell. Like, Chris was a massive King's X fan. And it just shows you the breadth of how many people they were influenced were into them. Well, we want to talk about a little bit about Dogman today, because I picked that song because it's a quintessential King's X song, but it's also one of their heaviest songs. And the funny thing about that is I wanted to do it because I love that song. I thought, well, I should do some due diligence and make sure it's popular. And I went on Spotify. It's their number one song. I was like, wow, I didn't even realize that.
It helps that it's a title track. It helps that it's, it's got that kind of double whammy. The album cover's very iconic as almost one of the quintessential grunge album covers it's thought of in many ways. That blue dog really does stand out still to this day. Really simple, right for the era, all that kind of stuff. And yet the music on it starts with Dogman, and there's no lead-in, there's no intro, and the weird, like, Beatlesy center in it, all the sleeping, never waking, all the leaves in need of raking, like this, this piece of poetry that is sitting there in the middle of it, sung as multi-point harmonies, right? So, yeah, Dogman did what it was supposed to do on that album, which was grab you by the shirt collar and say, listen to this album. The whole thing. It gave you everything that King's X does, from clean, dirty guitar work to Doug's bass growl to the harmonies to the soulful vocals that he has as a lead to the backup stuff where they're layering with each other in a way that seems impossible. A mixed race, hard rock band with a myriad of influences. It did everything, and then it led you into the rest of the record where you got songs like Pillow, which they still play live.
I love that song. It's so good.
And the audience found the band because Dogman drove them down the road to Pillow and cigarettes and held people by the heart. Because like on its own, Dogman could be a piece of poetic tripe because Dogman, God, that inverse reference has been made by many bands or whatever. But in this particular case, it became so personal instead of like an ethereal Pink Floyd kind of intellectual exercise. The way Doug sings it, it's about soul content and being your own worst enemy. And yet you could, if you turn things around, be the God in your own life. Make the life you want, but I'm always being the dog.
And it's a very honest song, too, because Doug was going through a lot of soul searching at that time and you know, thinking about a lot of different things that was going on in his life. And those guys were always very open in their lyrics about all that stuff and telling interesting stories and weaving. We get a band like this that just, this is what blows. I can't play any instrument at all. Maybe a 4/4 drum beat, maybe. But you look at a band like that where the music is insanely amazing. It's very intricate. It's very difficult. The vocals are the same way, like three guys singing all these harmonies that, like I said, are impossible to do. And then you add into it all these incredible lyrics and song titles and storylines. Sometimes I can't wrap my head around like how these guys come up with it.
Because it's three guys, it felt impossible to everybody listening to it. Because you have guys like Cantrell and all those guys in Alice in Chains obviously listening to them, and there's four of those guys. And they're like, why can't we make as much noise as these three guys can? And everybody felt that way because it always felt like there were five singers in it. And there is, because there's three of them singing together, and then there's two lead singers, and Jerry when he wants to be. And eventually we'll get to Jerry's piano and all the other stuff that he should be doing. But they're also fun to watch, and I would argue that one of my favorite songs in the world is Summerland. I love that song. I always will. It's my favorite song ever. And they know this, but the guitar solo on Over My Head, for example, like I remember seeing that video and watching Ty, that rip-oo, just like that slide pop that he does that nobody else was doing. Everybody's tapping, you can find the fret, you can land on it. You know, it made everybody else's playing look like they were using mallets. And here he is just syrupy flowing through this, and then Doug walks out with his 12-string bass, and you're like, what the hell is happening here? And at the same time, I really feel like, I remember when Pink Floyd put out a new record, maybe 8 years ago. And there were interviews, which were totally stupid, on like morning television and reviews about stuff. And they were like, Pink Floyd's been around for a long time, you know, as they get older, are they getting too old to rock? And I was like, okay, you've obviously never listened to Pink Floyd's music at all, because you can argue their music was older than they were. They matured into their music. Breathe makes way more sense when you're 60 than it does when you're 20. You know, taking away the moments that make up the dull day. That's something a man in his early 70s feels. In the same way that like when Johnny Cash covered Hurt by Nine Inch Nails, it became a real song instead of a narcissistic asshole whining about having too much money.
Also, time when you're in England in the 70s, you're pretty bored because there's not much to do.
But the same thing with King's X. I believe that in many ways, they're maturing into tracks they wrote when they were young in a way that they're recognizing, which is going to be a beautiful thing, because no man steps in the same river twice, and I think these guys are playing these songs that are new to them, even though they wrote them when they were young.
Let me take my thoughts away to think about another day. Remembering the times I prayed that help me do with me to be the Dogman.
So one thing we got to talk about before you go, you mentioned U2 earlier. And I'm a U2 fan from the old days. And U2 is one of those bands, when you go to a concert, there's no barrier. The band and the crowd are one. And King's X Live is that way. The first time I saw them, which would have been on the first time they came to the West Coast, which I guess was on the second record, but I went to the show and they played in Anaheim, sold out, like 900 people, and it was like a religious experience. Like, we were all at one, we're all singing the songs, they were magical on stage, and again, there's no barrier between the band and the crowd. It's all one thing, and they've maintained doing that all these years. It's still, I go see them, it's like, it's still so amazing how the bond between the band and the crowd is, and that doesn't that happens rarely.
Let me be abundantly clear. I love presentational bands too. I am a giant Kiss fan, and it's
Same here.
not accidental that they have a veneer up. You know, the old Oscar Wilde thing: "Give a man a mask, and he'll tell you the truth." Right? There's an element of that in Kiss's stuff that they were able to live out ego in a way that was safe because they were wearing these exorbitant outfits that other people don't feel. You don't feel the confidence to be yourself because how fucking dare you? And Kiss literally is an example of like staring God in the face and going, "Here I am, you can't miss me." And it's why I love David Lee Roth. It's why, you know, like David Lee Roth was staring God in the face and saying, you know, "Here I am, you can't miss me." And there's so much value in that, especially for like young music fans, that I think is missing from a lot of modern music. People will always say that, but there's an element of that the good ego. I've earned this place. I'm giving you something as opposed to I'm taking something. There's a swagger to 80s metal that was opposite from, say, new metal, that was, instead of taking sex from someone, it was, you can't help but come here. It was the Casanova complex, and it was all designed on, I'm going to be your backdoor band, you're going to sneak around, you know, like Wasp, Warrant, everything. It's, I'm the guy you sneak around with. Right? For somebody's confidence at that age, the value of that is like, I have worth and it is intrinsic to me, not I'm going to make you see it. You can't not. In King's X's music, there's a more soulful version of that, but all the music has worth. It comes from a position of I have worth in this conversation, both whether it's a romantic song or a melancholy romantic song like Summerland. I have worth, and this has worth, this relationship. Even if it's gone, it had worth. And I think that's the thing that attracts me most to them and that genre.
Well, it's like I said earlier, it's the depth of what they do, and you described it pretty perfectly. So, all right, well, we got to run, but thank you so much for doing this. I love your fandom of King's X, one of my favorite bands of all time, and like I said, I wish we had another 500,000 of you that felt the same way.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah, it's getting there.
Chipping away.
Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, man.
I mean, I live stream 6 days a week at infotainmentwars.com. I'm on all the time. If you follow me on Instagram, it will constantly go, Hal Sparks is live. You know, like Kiss in 1977.
Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Remembering the times I prayed to let me take my thoughts away, to think about another day, to help me deal with me, to help me deal with me, to be the Dogman.
And there you have it. Huge thanks to Hal Sparks for doing this. Thanks to Mark Lewis for having us at his studio, where it was fun to record with him. Thanks, as always, to Mr. Martin Popoff, the legendary Mr. Martin Popoff, and another legendary guy, Lizzie Borden, for our theme song, and, of course, the great producer, the man who makes it all happen here, Mr. Christian Blatz. We will see you guys next episode.